that seeks to usurp the authority of the United States Congress and of the American people. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my good friend, Chairman Cole, for his leadership. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the agreement reached between the two houses, the incoming Trump White House and the Republican-led United States House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, CRs are not ideal. They are not preferred. But come the new year, we will begin a new era of regular order. As well, I expect we will be working in a concerted manner for the next 4 years, to borrow a phrase, make America great again. As we are all aware, the vacuum of leadership from the current White House has been filled already by the incoming White House. The Trump Doge team also proved to be consequential, Mr. Speaker, rooting out unnecessary provisions throughout this government funding process, streamlining bloated legislation and exposing it to the American people, which resulted in a better, leaner deal and a reduction of pages in the bill from 1,547 to 118. A huge reduction, all done in Trump time. This legislation delivers responsible disaster relief, targeted spending reductions, an agreement to address the debt ceiling, and avoids a government shutdown. Our work will reflect the will of the people to carry out the America First agenda. We must deliver results to show the American people that we are serious about correcting the course of our nation, and this bill is the first step in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman's recognized. Gentleman from Connecticut.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, the distinguished ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Pallone.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard my colleague on the Republican side talk about the reduction in the number of pages in the bill. But what I want to point out is by reducing the number of pages, that's not the issue. They've reduced the help for the American people that's in this bill. That's what the Republicans have done. The beginning of the week, we had a bipartisan bill that provided critical relief for the American people. And from my perspective on the Energy and Commerce Committee, what we had done over the last year was hear from our constituents, had hearings, to hear about what was necessary to lower costs, to provide relief for people that, as you know, feel very strongly that prices are too high, that there's all kinds of problems with corporate interests and websites that are not protecting their interests, not protecting their privacy, soliciting all kinds of things with misinformation, because we're the committee that deals primarily with health care, with consumer protection, with environmental concerns. And so what we did is we worked on a bipartisan basis to put together in this legislation proposals that would really make a difference from what we heard from our constituents around the country. Now, that's what's been taken out of this bill. And it's been taken out because one man, a billionaire, decided to tell my Republican colleagues that he did not want this bill. I'm not going to figure out why he doesn't want it, but obviously, you know, the types of things that I'm talking about are not the things that he would want in the bill. So what are we talking about here? What was taken out of this bill? Well, first, my colleague, the ranking member of Appropriations, mentioned pediatric cancer and rare disease therapies, research for cancer, for kids that are facing cancer problems, community health centers, teaching health centers to provide more primary care doctors. Those were extended for 2 years and then for 5 years with more funding for that purpose. Prescription drug reforms. One of the biggest problems that we face right now is so-called PBMs, pharmaceutical benefit manufacturers. What they do, managers, what they do is, theoretically, they're supposed to work between, like, the insurer or the individual and the drug companies to reduce prices. But what they do instead is, because there's no transparency, what they actually do is pocket the money that they've negotiated, the savings that they've negotiated for themselves, rather than give it back to the consumer. And so what we did on the Energy and Commerce Committee, we said, no, we want reform of PBMs that basically is sort of a way of saying that they cannot, if they negotiate savings, that has to go back to the consumer to lower costs for prescription drugs, which is one of the biggest things that people are concerned now. Their health care, one of the biggest costs that they have in health care. So these are the types of things that have been taken out of this bill.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I would be happy to give the gentleman another 30 seconds, another minute if he needs it. Okay.
These are the types of things that have been taken out of this bill. Health care protections, consumer protections, environmental protections, safety protections. These are the types of things that have been taken out of this bill because some billionaire, richest man on earth, decided that he didn't want those things. This has now become a bill that has taken out anything that is important, essentially, for consumer or health protection or for relief to lower costs for the American people. And thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlewoman reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stolber.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, tonight, let's put the politics aside. We're here right now discussing a bill that has very good things in it. As my good friend Mr. Cole says, let's not fight about what's not in it at this moment. We know that Democrats had priorities in it earlier and Republicans had priorities in this bill earlier. But we are going to break the fever here in Washington and stop putting the Christmas tree gifts in at the last minute that costs American taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. Let's talk about what's in it. For the small family farmer, for that dairy farmer from Minnesota that was in my office 48 hours ago, begging us for assistance. This bill will help you and many other farmers across this great country. For the victims of the hurricanes, Helene and Milton, who are the victims tonight who are sleeping in tents, Mr. Chair, because they don't have a house. There is American Rescue. Taxpayers are going to come and help you tonight. Through no fault of your own. You suffered through a hurricane. And the U.S. Congress tonight, the House of Representatives, are going to vote to support you. This is a clean resolution with the debt ceiling. This is what my good friends and colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted just yesterday. So let's talk about the good things that are in it. To our farmers, we will support you, both Republicans and Democrats. To our victims of natural disasters, we will support you tonight. A clean CR, I support this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Connecticut.
Reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Alford.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you to the chair for your leadership and our ranking member as well, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 'twas 5 days before Christmas and all through this House. Not a lawmaker was resting, not even their spouse. The CR was stalled, the debates full of heat, while a shutdown shadow loomed over our streets. My friends, it's time to fund our defense and aid for our farms and disaster relief to protect our very own citizens from harm. Our farmers work hard. They deserve every chance to grow and to prosper, advance, and enhance. Mr. Speaker, this Christmas, let's give we the people their due, a funded government from leaders who are true. So as we vote on this CR, let's keep this in sight. America first, and to all, a good night. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut.
Reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
I would advise my friend I'm prepared to close whenever she is.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Connecticut.
If the gentleman would understand that I'm waiting for a reserve, but someone else was coming to speak. If you just,
I would ask the Speaker to inquire how much time we have on each side.
Gentleman from Oklahoma has 12 and a half minutes. The gentlewoman from Connecticut has 7.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just want to take a moment to address something my very good friend from New Jersey had to say about what's not in the bill. And again, as another speaker referenced, I always believe you look at legislation according to what's in the bill and don't worry about what's not in it. Make the judgment on what's there. And the reality is, in this bill, we keep the government open. My friends favor that. I hope they vote that way tonight. In this bill, we provide badly needed aid to Americans that are suffering in a disaster. I know my friends favor doing that. I hope they vote accordingly tonight. And as several of the speakers have mentioned, we provide much needed assistance to America's rural economy. So I hope my friends actually support that as well with a positive vote tonight. I also want to point out, and I speak now not as a Republican or a Democrat, but as an appropriator. I, for one, think these very good ideas some people have ought to generally move to the floor as separate bills. One of the reasons people distrust this institution is because we quite often pile things on bills that are totally unrelated. Everything that my friends on the other side and I negotiated in the appropriations area is actually in this bill and actually as negotiated. And I think it's unfortunate, and we do this on both sides, so I'm not trying to score political points here. As I said, I'm speaking as an appropriator. I hope we get back to doing what we should do, and that is move legislation through this body appropriately, as narrowly focused as possible. And these end of the year or end of the session or just before breaks, massive bills, I don't think serve the American people well. I don't think they serve this institution well. And I know many of my friends on the other side actually agree with that. So let's look at this as an opportunity to step back and actually focus on what our job here is. And we have no more important job than funding the government, helping Americans in disaster, assisting folks over a long-term crisis in rural America, and then closing down our business and going home. These other matters should be dealt with next year. And as has been indicated, they're generally bipartisan nature. They ought to move through on their own. And that's just my thought, my reflection. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Connecticut.
Prepared to close. Okay.
Gentlewoman is prepared to close.
Let me just be done with this stuff here. I'd like to take a moment with the time that I have to highlight that we did come to an agreement and acknowledge there are things in this bill that reflect the bipartisan and bicameral agreement on disaster relief. And I also might add, as the ranking member on appropriations, we came to agreement on moving forward on appropriations bills. And the supplemental, by the way, includes substantial Democratic wins. And since the summer of 2023, we have been pushing Republicans for a comprehensive disaster supplemental. I am pleased that we have an agreement on $100 billion in disaster aid. And that includes $8 billion for emergency highway funds, including paying the full 100% cost to replace the Key Bridge in Maryland. $2.3 billion for disaster loans for small businesses. More than $3 billion for water infrastructure grants from the EPA and $1.5 billion for the Army Corps of Engineers projects. $12 billion for community development block grants to assist with long-term housing, infrastructure, and economic recovery needs, and $21 billion in disaster assistance to farmers, to producers. And this, by the way, is separate from the agreement on an additional $10 billion for farm aid. I might add that at the outset of the negotiations, I think it's important to know that there were those on the other side of the aisle who wanted to really cut the disaster effort, even to have to provide offsets for the disaster. That was very real. Democrats held the line and said no, that we would get $100 billion for disaster aid because of how critically important it is. Unfortunately, and I might add, there was agreement, as well as what Democrats talked about on disaster relief, there was also agreement on pediatric cancer and rare disease research, community health centers, teaching health centers, prescription drug reform, pediatric therapies. This was all agreed to. It wasn't that we were saying, we don't want disaster, you don't want these. We came to a conclusion that these were all of the pieces that were needed to move forward. I also might add, because I am very concerned about our supply chain and what happens with regard to what we transmit and provide for the Communist Party, for China. And while I support all of the disaster pieces, and I supported all the health pieces, it is maddening that the Republicans walked away from that bipartisan priority, the outbound investment to ensure American dollars and intellectual property are reinvested in America's businesses and workers, instead of fueling the Chinese Communist Party's technology and their capabilities. And that, again, which can be documented, is something that is critically important, that it not be there to Elon Musk because of all of his efforts and contracts that he has and the work that he has in China. That should not enter into how we craft a bill that serves the American people and American workers. It is unfortunate the way that this process has worked out. You know, we want to, and we really need to rely on each other. We need to rely on each other to keep our word. That when we have an agreement, that we keep that agreement. I said this as well yesterday. I think all of us know here in the Congress that the only thing that we have is our credibility and our word. That is what allows us to move forward, to trust one another, to move forward on legislation that helps and serves the American people. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin and reiterate a point that I made earlier. And I know my good friend from Connecticut and I may disagree tonight on this particular incident, but I think as a broad principle, we probably do agree that it's much better, honestly, as an appropriator, when we are not carrying everybody else's weight. You know, sometimes the mule finally breaks down. And I would just tell my friends, working in good faith, and particularly in bipartisan bills like we had in WIOA reauthorization and some of the health issues that were mentioned earlier, please bring your bills to the floor under your own time. Don't try to catch a ride with us right at the end. People hate that. Our own members don't get a chance to read the bills in some cases. The public doesn't get a chance to have a full debate on the issue. It's simply not good governance. And I would actually argue that this legislation is focused and easy to understand and easy to read. The parts that are important to it are really only about 130 pages. Those are the things that the Appropriations Committee did, and we did it in a bipartisan fashion and a good faith debate, and all of those things are in this bill. I tell my friends on both sides of the aisle, so I say this again, not in a partisan sense at all, but remember, if you vote no on this bill, you are effectively voting to shut down the government. If you vote no on this bill, you're effectively voting to deny assistance to Americans who suffered enormously from natural disasters. If you vote no on this bill, you're effectively voting not to help rural America in a time of crisis on our farms and ranches all through the country. So the stakes are pretty clear here, and I'm hopeful on all these things we agree. We don't have any partisan disagreement. These are things that we agree on, and there's nothing in this bill, certainly that my friends on the other side disagree with. There may certainly well be some other disagreements here or there, but broadly speaking, this is something we should do. None of us, or most of us, do not want to shut down the government. Not a good thing for the country. So I can go on and we can get in a debate, and I'd like to be, in the give and take of debate as much as anybody else. But it is, after all, the holiday season. I know I have members that are anxious to get home, be with their families and their friends in the holiday season. So I simply want to conclude by wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, whatever would be appropriate in your faith tradition, and hope that you have a wonderful and blessed new year, and that we have a great year for America in store ahead of us. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Amen.
The chair wishes to express appreciation on behalf of the House to members for the tone and tenor of tonight's debate, and express appreciation to the staff on both sides of the House for working through these last 48 hours. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill 10545? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The gentlewoman from Connecticut, for what purpose do you?
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 366, the nays 34, one member voting present, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Hey, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question of suspending the rules on passing H.R. 9748, which the clerk will report by title.
H.R. 9748, a bill to require the Undersecretary of the Science and Technology Director of the Department of Homeland Security to develop a department-wide policy and process to safeguard research and development from unauthorized access to or disclosure of sensitive information in research and development acquisitions and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 8662, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar Number 533, H.R. 8662. A bill to reduce commuting burdens on Transportation Security Administration employees and for other purposes.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.